everybody, and welcome to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Rosemary, and every week I make a video that has something to do with crafting or doll making or how to use your sewing machine. Lately I've been doing some classes on how to use your brother's sewing machine so that you can understand tensions and threads and needles and how to use it as an embroidery machine. But today I thought we'd take a little bit of a break and make a table runner for Valentine's Day. So what I've done is I've done just a little bit of piecing and then applique some hearts on it and then put some ribbon on it using the braiding foot from the Brother sewing machine. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make this, and hopefully even if you don't want to make a Valentine's Day runner, you'll learn a few techniques with your sewing machine and have some fun. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is you want to get several different prints of white on white. This one's upside down. And you can get those at your local fabric store. And I've gotten probably 6 different ones here. And then what you want to do is cut them into 4-inch squares. And the reason why I did 4-inch strips. And the reason why I've chosen 4-inch strips is because I've said this before, I'm not a great quilter and I'm a little bit on the lazy side and I want to get to the fun part, so I just want to get a quilt in the center of my table runner, and 4 inches sounded pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and lay them right sides together, and I'm going to stitch a 1/4-inch seam and make a big piece of all of these strips sewn together. So what I've done is I finished sewing the strips together, and then I went ahead and I pressed it out really nice and flat, and I actually made 2 pieces like this with the 5 different white on whites in a different order so that I could mix them up a little bit. And then I went ahead and took it to my cutting table and cut it in this direction, 4-inch increments this way. And this is what I got. These different pieces of 4-inch strips with a mixed up combination of the white on white fabrics. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them next to each other like this. Just a little bit off, because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of trouble trying to get these corners to come together exactly right, and then I'm not happy if all my corners don't come together. So instead of causing all sorts of stress, I would rather just mix it up a little bit and make them so they're deliberately off center. And I don't want to put 2 pieces that are the same together like this, so I'll take this one apart and I'll put another one in there. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, she's just making this up as she goes along, you are absolutely right. That is exactly the way I am doing it. I'm just kind of trying to lay it together and mix them up, make it up, try and make it come together the way I want it to. And then I'm going to lay these like this, and I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch, and then I'll show you what we get from there. Okay, so I'm back from the sewing machine. I have sewed my strips together and continued to stagger the squares. And then after I sewed them all together, I just took my rotary cutter and I cut a nice straight line so that I have a nice table runner here. I don't know how well you can actually see the table runner that I've created here. It's pretty basic and easy to do, and if you are more of a quilter than I am and you wanted to make your squares come together, that's fine. But what I wanted to do was get to the fun part. We're going to applique some hearts on here. The first part I'm going to do on the embroidery machine, but if you don't have an embroidery machine, please don't turn this off, because we are going to do some applique the old-fashioned way, so I can show you how to do that with some of the stitches in your sewing machine. We're just going to have a whole lot of fun with this and kind of make it into an applique sampler and then finish it off as a table runner. So let's go to the sewing machine. Before we go to embroider out the hearts that we've created, I wanted to say a little bit about stabilizing. It's really important to use a good stabilizer when you're embroidering on regular fabric, but when you're doing a quilt, you've got all these little squares, and you can see I've already done some of the hearts on here, but I just wanted to kind of go back over again because I'm going to hoop this. When you're doing a quilt, you could very easily pull on this, and because of all the stitching and the piecing, that would kind of pull it apart and make it so that it didn't lay flat. When I went to tear the stabilizer away, the stitches would bounce back to where they were, and then I would have puckers and it wouldn't look as pretty as I want it to. So I want to make sure I don't stretch it while I'm hooping it. And the best way to do that is to use KK2000. And I've shown this to you before. I really like this because it's a temporary spray. It's it kind of evaporates after a while, so it doesn't make everything really sticky, but it's going to hold my quilt in place while I hoop it. So I'm going to spray this. And then I'm going to lay my quilt across the top and smooth it down. Okay, so I'm sitting here in front of my Solaire sewing machine. What I want to do is I want to show you how to create a heart in my design center. And then I'm going to go into the embroidery part of the sewing machine and show you how to do a heart that's a little bit simpler for those of you who don't have a design center. And if you don't have an embroidery machine, please don't exit, because we are going to show you how to do a really basic applique heart using your regular sewing machine. So this should be a lot of fun. We're going to do a couple different techniques, and we're going to end up with a table runner. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my design center, and I want to find a shape. So first I'm going to come into the shapes, and I'm going to pick a heart and say okay. And this is a nice big size heart. It's a little bit too narrow for me. So if I hit size, I can come in here, and instead of just make it bigger, I can stretch it out this way to get a little bit rounder heart for what I'm trying to do. And that looks okay to me. So I'm going to use that heart. Now I want to fill it with a kind of a lacy effect instead of an applique. I've already showed you how to do applique in the design center, and if you haven't seen that, go back and look at my Halloween table runner, and that shows you how to create an applique. But we're going to just do a fun little kind of decorative fill on this. So I'm going to go into with the design center, the top part is always your outline, the bottom part is always your fill. So I'm going to go into the fill, and I'm going to hit this. And there's a couple different fills. I can actually do a solid fill if I wanted to do that, but I'm going to hit this part right here. And if you have a Luminaire or a Dream Machine, they have the exact same one. The Luminaire has a few more options for fills, but both of them, all three of them have some different kinds of fun fills that are in here. I'm going to hit this, and you can see all the different ones that are in here. And I think the one I've decided to do is I'm going to do this one right here, and then I'm going to say okay. And it doesn't really matter what color because it has to do with the thread that I'm using, but I'm going to choose red and say okay. And then if you hit the paintbrush, which it always defaults to, it's going to paint like that. We don't really want it to do that. So we're going to hit back. We're going to hit the pour button. And when you hit the pour button, it will automatically fill. Now what it does on the outside defaults to a satin stitch. I don't want it to do a satin stitch. I want to do something a little different. So I'm going to come up here to the outline. I'm going to hit this. I'm going to go to the stars. And I'm going to also say that I want that to be red and say okay. And then I want to do the pour because the pencil one is actually going to draw like that. And I don't want to do that. I want to pour. And then all I have to do is tap it with my finger. And I know that it changed because the outline just changed to red. So it is going to do the stars. And again, the Luminaire has a lot more options for doing this outline than my Solaire does. So if you have a Luminaire, look at some of those fun stitches that you can do on the outside of your heart. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit next. And it's going to show me what I've created. Down here, I have the option of changing the size of that. So if I don't want that to be so small, if I wanted it to be looser, like I was doing a quilt, I could make it bigger. Let's just do as high as it'll go, which is 200. And I'm going to hit set and then preview. so that we can see what that's going to do. See, that's a much bigger one than what I wanted. So I'm going to push return. I'm going to hit this again and bring it back down to 100 again. And set that. Now this one is going to change the direction. And so if I don't want these to be straight up and down, I want them to be a little bit facing a different direction, I can hit this and I can say I want that to be, let's make it 75 and see if we can see the difference. I picked a pretty back and forth design, so I don't know if we'll see the difference, but let's hit preview. Yeah, it's really hard to tell, but if I wanted the direction to be different, it would do that. So let's hit return and go into here and pick, let's see, something. Oh, let's do the bricks. So if I do the bricks, say okay, pour, and tap it. Now if I hit next and hit my direction, and set and preview, you can really see that I changed the direction. It did not change the direction of the heart. It's still straight up and down, but now the bricks are going a different direction. So that's how you change your directional fill on the different fills. I'm going to go return. I'm going to hit this, select. I want to go back to this, say okay, okay, pour, tap, and next. And the last one is going to basically tell it to do an outline stitch around it. I don't want it to do that because I have my other outline stitch I have. So I'm going to turn that off so it doesn't do an outline stitch and set that down and then hit preview. There's my heart. That's exactly what I wanted to create. I'm going to set that down. Now the good news is if I decide I want to change this in size, I can hit edit and size. And if I use this button right here, and I know I've shown this to you before, but if I use that button right there, I can change the size of this heart 100%. So it can go all the way down to a little heart, or it can go all the way up to a big heart. So I can change my mind as I get ready to sew this out and put it on a different part of my table runner. And I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to put it in the memory of my machine so I can do it. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to delete this, and I'm going to show you how you can make one in the embroidery machine if you don't have a design center. So this is a menu that's going to be in just about every Brother machine you can purchase, including the entry-level 4x4 machine that's got these little shapes. And I think that they're really great. You can do a lot of things with them. If you first select it, you're going to get a bunch of circles. But if you look up here, you have some different options on shapes. So here's a heart. So now it's going to show me what I can do with that heart. I can create a whole lot of different things. So if I want to, right on my quilt, create a heart that doesn't have a centerpiece embroidery on it, I could just pick this one here that looks like a little rope, and I could set it down and embroider that with a red thread, and it'll come out really cute. And I'm going to do that in a couple different places on our quilt, but I also want to make an applique. So I'm going to cancel that, and I am going to just pick a heart that's a running stitch. And with that, I'm going to set that down, and then I'm going to push add, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick that same heart again, heart. But this time I'm going to pick a satin stitch, and I'm going to push set, and that should set it right on top of the last one, just like that. And if I didn't move it, it would come out exactly where I want it to be. Now, if your machine has got this part right here on the bottom, that's a group button. So it is kind of nice to be able to group this together. So if I hit that and hit this, it's going to select both of those items. I can say okay, edit, and group. So now the running stitch and the satin stitch are grouped together. I can put them on my quilt wherever I want to. I can rotate it a little bit like this and allow and kind of scatter them all over. If you don't have the group button, then we're going to have to move them separately, but that's okay because we can do that and we can sew out a couple different ones on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make an applique out of this design. So I moved the heart a little bit closer to the edge of the hoop so you can see a little bit better, but we are going to scatter hearts all over this table runner, so we'll do a few more in different places. I do want to show you how to do an applique though, and before we even start this, I want to tell you that I'm going to put the foot down. Sometimes when you do just a running stitch, for some reason, and I don't understand why, it doesn't pick up the bobbin thread and it just starts sewing and it really doesn't make any stitches. So in order to stop that from happening, use your needle down button and your needle up and give it a little tug and pull that bobbin thread up in the same way that you would normally do. Let me see if I can get it to come up. If you're a quilter and you're doing free motion, you pull the bobbin thread up so that they're both up on the top. And then when you start to sew that first outline heart, it is going to grab right away and start making stitches. And that's the same that's true with some of the store-bought applique ones as well. They'll do the same thing to you, and it's very frustrating when you think your sewing machine's broken. But that's one way of solving the problem, is just go ahead and pull that bobbin thread up. I'm going to cut these threads. Now it's done a running stitch. And when I made this applique, I neglected to make a second running stitch. I could have done that when I was first creating it, but all I really have to do is back it up one, and then it'll do that same running stitch a second time. So I'm going to reach over, and I'm going to, you can't see it, but I'm going to back it up to one more so it does that heart again. And then I'm going to lay this fabric that I've cut that's just big enough to cover my running stitch, so I don't have to worry about it accidentally not catching. And then I'm going to put my foot down and sew that one, and hopefully I won't have to worry about that bobbin thread again. It's catching, it's good. So it's going to sew that all the way around and hold that down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my hoop towards me so I can see more what I'm doing. And I'm going to use my applique scissors. And I like these scissors because they're very sharp and they have a little wedge on the side that helps me keep them flat against the fabric and cut. So I'm going to cut as close to my stitching as I possibly can. And I'll lift up the edge of the fabric and just get really close to that stitching. And I'm going to stop the camera and finish that up. Okay, so you can see that I have cut off all the excess fabric right up to my stitching, and it actually looks like a heart right now. So I'm going to push my hoop back into place and lock it, and it should be ready to do the satin stitch now. So all I'm going to do is lower my foot and push go. And if I lined it up good, it should do a satin stitch all the way around. So what I want to do now is to show you how to do a simple applique on your sewing machine if you don't have an embroidery machine. What I've done is I've cut out a heart. First, I ironed on the back of it a applique adhesive. And there's a whole lot of different ones out there. There's a Stitch Witchery Heat and Bond, Floriani has one called Appliqué Wonder. There's a lot of different ones, and they all basically do the same thing. You iron it onto your fabric first, and you can actually draw on the paper so that you can get the shape of your heart, and then you peel the paper off and you iron it onto what you're going to applique. And we all know how to do a heart. We learned that in elementary school. You fold the paper in half and then you just cut around. So I got a fairly nice little heart there. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to peel off the backing. And I'm going to put this heart right here on the end of my table runner. And then I'm going to use a nice dry iron with no steam, and I'm going to press. Not iron. You don't want to move it back and forth. You just want to press. And now it is adhered to my quilt, and I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to applique that down. Here we are in front of my brother's sewing machine, and this is my main sewing screen with the straight and zigzag stitches on it. If I go into the character decorative stitches and come in here where it looks like satin stitches, I can just choose this and it's automatically going to do an applique stitch for me. But maybe I don't really want to do it in the way that they've got set it up, or maybe I don't have a machine that has one of those automatic ones. So I'm going to go back to the utility stitches, and I am going to just pick a simple zigzag. Every sewing machine, with the exception of a few quilting machines, has got a zigzag on it. Then all I have to do is decide how wide I want that to be. I want it to be 3.0, and then I need to change my stitch length, and I want to bring it down as close to 0 as I can get without actually going to 0. So maybe a 0.3 would be a good one to give it a try. And I may want to practice that on a piece of scrap fabric first before I start to actually put it on my heart. But I know that 0.3 is pretty much what I want it to look like. Okay, so I moved the camera so that it is in a place where you can see a little bit more what I'm doing. And one of the things I want to do is I want to change my foot. This is the J foot, and the J foot is a great foot for doing regular straight stitching, but it's very flat on the bottom, and it doesn't make it good for applique because we're going to be laying down a lot of thread, and it'll actually back up and bunch up and not look good. The end foot, which comes with your machine, and it has a big N on it, is not flat on the bottom. It has a little channel right in here, and that is made especially so that when you do stitches that are really close together, the thread will slide up underneath it and you'll get good contact with your feed dogs without bunching up. So that's the one that you want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on my machine. Sorry about that. I had a little trouble getting my machine to thread. I don't know. Sometimes the threader doesn't work the way I want it to. So I've got the edge of my heart lined up with the center of my end foot. And I'm going to go ahead and put that foot down so that it lines up pretty good right down the middle. I'm also going to set my machine to pivot, and almost all of the brother machines in the computerized line have a way that you can pivot. If not, you'll have to lift the foot yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to sew. Don't force it. Let the machine pull that fabric through, and keep the edge of your fabric right on the edge. Right in the center of that end foot, and let it satin stitch around the outside edges. And it'll do a nice job. And I'm going to just continue to go all the way around the edge of my heart. Sorry about that. I had a little trouble getting my machine to thread. Things like that happen every once in a while, but I got it threaded. And one of the things I forgot to tell you is make sure that you put some stabilizer on the back. If you're not an embroiderer and you've never used stabilizer before, go into a sewing and vacuum store and ask for tearaway stabilizer. It goes back behind your work, and it will actually hold everything stiff. Even with the applique fusible on it, which stiffens the fabric a little bit, it's not going to be stiff enough and you're not going to get a good stitch. So it's really important that you put that tearaway stabilizer on the back to get a good applique. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the foot down and I'm going to line up the edge of my heart with the center of my end foot. I forgot to do a couple of things and I started to do this, so that's why you see some stitching on it, but I'm not happy with the way it looks. And one of the things that I did wrong is I forgot to lower my tension. Almost every time you do a satin stitch, you want to lower your tension, and I know almost every time you go to a class they say don't touch the tension, leave it at 4 or 5. This is one of the exceptions to the rule. You want to bring it down to probably a 3.0 so you get a little softer stitch, and put that stabilizer on the back, and we should be ready to go now. So let me try it. Let's see. We're going to stitch right over my old stitching to make sure it looks good. Keep that edge of the heart right down the center of your end foot and it should come out good. I'm going to continue to do this off camera and show you what it looks like when it's finished. Okay, so I'm about ready to finish my heart here. One of the things that's really important is to remember you're laying down a lot of thread here, and it's very close together, so it's probably going to be very slow going. Do not force it. Don't grab your fabric and pull it from the behind, and don't push on it. Just kind of let the machine move your fabric through so you get a nice satin stitch instead of a wobbly zigzaggy one. So, and which is one of the reasons why we use the end foot. So we're going to come to the end here. Okay, so this is my table runner so far, and this is the part that we just did with a manual satin stitch around the edges to create an applique in that way. But I've done a couple of different ones all the way up and down here, and I'm going to add some more to it actually. But before I go and do that, what I want to do is I want to sew some ribbon on here. And I'm going to just kind of sew it along the edges everywhere, kind of intertwining all over the top of it like this. And before I do that, I want to do two things. First, I want to mark it so that I get it right and don't do it and then say, oh no, that's not exactly what I wanted at all. I want it to look better. So I want to kind of get an idea to work out where the ribbon's going to go before I do it. And in order to do that, I need to use a pin that disappears. And I have these friction pins and I like them a whole lot because when you draw with them, they disappear with the iron with heat. And if you watched my last video, I used one of those that disappear with air, and you saw my frustration. It doesn't always work right. And at this point, I kind of want to do a shout out to my friend Deanna. For years in San Diego, I worked in a sewing and vacuum store. If any of you are my customers from there, I miss you guys all something terrible, but things are working out for me really good here in Colorado. But Deanna was so sweet. She watched my video that I did last week and saw my frustration, and she sent these to me in the mail. So thank you so much, Deanna. I'm definitely going to use these. So I've got this pin right here, and I'm going to just kind of draw where I want my ribbon to go. And it doesn't have to be really dark. It's just my way of kind of playing out the ribbon so that I know that I'm getting it pretty much, because I'll have to keep moving this and getting it in different places. And I'm going to do more than one ribbon. I'm going to try a couple different ones. So the next one is going to come from here and cross over this way. Maybe stop there and continue here. Like I said, I want to do some different hearts on top of the ribbon after I put the ribbon on it, so it looks just like a jumble of hearts. So hopefully this is going to come out really good. I mentioned before that I'm kind of just doing this, making it up as I go along. The other thing that I want to show you is that this is a brother braiding foot, and it's really cool because this little part here unscrews, and then this slides back and forth. So I can use really thin braid and I can use really thick braid. And I can take my ribbon and feed it through this and put it up underneath, and then it'll follow me wherever I go while I'm sewing. And I'm going to show you how that works on my table runners as soon as I move to the sewing machine. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've got my braiding foot on here and I've put my ribbon through it. I actually started a little bit because I want to basically try and figure out how to get the camera so you can see what I'm doing. I have put a 3-part zigzag on here. I'm not going to show you where the 3-part zigzag is on the machine because I showed you before in one of the other videos, but it's actually the zigzag stitch that stops as it goes across, as it's making a zigzag. It works really well for sewing down braid or ribbon because it doesn't just jump over the top of it. It actually sews it down as you're going, so it will lie nice and flat. So that's the stitch that I'm using, and I'm trying to get this lined up. Now, I did draw those lines with my pen, but sometimes it just doesn't work out because of the width of the ribbon. But at least I have a following line, but I'm not going to freak out if I don't get right on my line. So I'm just going to hold my ribbon kind of up like this as I go and move my fabric. And I'm hoping that you can see what I'm doing. This is not an easy thing to do, to sew and film at the same time. But you can see how the foot holds the ribbon, basically feeds it under the foot evenly for me. So all I really have to do is guide my fabric so that it goes up and under. And it's going to sew it down as I go. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish this up so that I can see a little bit better what I'm doing. And I'm going to do it with a couple of different ribbons. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you what my quilt looks like completely finished. Okay, so here's my table runner completely finished. I just wanted to show you a little bit of a close-up of what it looks like with all the different kinds of embroidery and applique on it. I went ahead and I did the quilting on my Stillaire sewing machine, and if you want to know how to do that, you can go back to my Halloween table runner and I show you how to do that on the Stillaire. But you can do quilting in any way that works for you, stitch in the ditch or just tie it, and you'll have a nice table runner to finish you off. The heart on the bottom is the one that I did with just plain machine applique doing a satin stitch, and you'll see that there's some little tiny hearts there that I created using my Stillaire sewing machine and just drawing a small heart and filling it in and then putting it in some different places. So I hope you had a lot of fun making this table runner. I know I did, and I'm really pleased with the way it came out. I think what we're going to do in the next couple of videos is we're going to start making some dolls. I've mentioned before that I do a charity sew where we make dolls for children in crisis, and I think I've kind of wanted to expand it to make some dolls for women who just need something to make them smile. So I have created this little pattern with this doll with a little pink face. Pink hair, I'm sorry. And I thought it would be really fun to make a couple of these. So if you think that would be fun, check me out in the next week or so. If you had a lot of fun making this project, then like, subscribe, make a few comments, let me know what you might like to see me make in the future, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.